So I want to make this other video. I'd previously talked about the fuel injection that I did on this thing, and I didn't take any videos of actually putting the fuel injection in. So I just want to kind of show what I did and where I put stuff. It's a Howell fuel injection setup. It passed smog no problem. It runs great, starts good. It's still cold-blooded, but it runs good once it's warmed up. It gets pretty good fuel economy. I'm not helping it much by having these 33s with the stock gearing, but as long as you're on flat ground, it does all right, and not trying to go 70 miles an hour. Anyway, here's the this is the throttle body. It uses a GM type throttle body. Everybody probably already knows. It works very, very good. You're able to get rid of the carburetor. This is a 90, so it had the computer controlled carburetor, which is absolute junk. I got this Howell fuel injection setup secondhand. I traded it for purchasing a wiring harness for a Vortec motor in another Jeep, which this was in, and then I bought the harness, and then the guy gave me this in trade. It had everything I needed, including the air cleaner. So I gutted all the wiring, tried to keep it pretty clean. The harness are all the sensors. It's a coolant temperature sensor. There's a bracket right there for I just made a little bracket there for the map sensor. Let me see. That's the that little deal right there. That's a vacuum source for the heater. The O2 sensor in the stock manifold, the stock YJ manifold. You can see it right there. I was able to just use that port that had previously been plugged, so that worked out all right. And then all the harness down here for the ignition signal and all that stuff is here. It's the twisted wires that you can see right there, and that goes back into the factory harness. I had everything from this system goes through the firewall, right back behind there. Can't really see, you can just barely see the grommet, but it's back behind this vent tube and the main harness. And then I'm going to go underneath and show you where I put the fuel pump and the filter. So above the belly pan, I just basically scabbed off the original vent tube for the return, and I used the source. I tapped into it. I plumbed it there. You can see there's a couple of brackets that I fabbed up for the. Let me get this light so you can see it good. Bracket there for the fuel filter. I just welded it right to the frame, and then further back here you can see the mount for the pump. That clamp that's holding it down. See if I can get a better shot from over here. The clamp that's holding it down is actually a conduit clamp for electrical conduit, and it was just about the perfect size. I clamped it, closed it up a little bit, put a little bit of rubber around it to isolate the pump, and it's all plumbed with quality fuel line clamps. And you can see those lines carry on all the way up to the back of the manifold, where the inputs are in the throttle body. I actually pulled this thing in here today. I was going to do a rear main seal, but when I got up in there, I realized it wasn't a main seal. It was the fuel pump block-off plate, which is what caused me to want to think about this. That fuel pump block-off plate is right down there, and it's leaking like a sieve, and it's actually running right down the oil pan, cleared, drenched the starter, and behind the oil pan back onto the bell housing, which made me think that it had a rear main leak. It was leaking like crazy, but it doesn't leak when it runs like a rear main seal, but it leaks. It drips after you stop, but it was leaking pretty good and right from a specific place, but it's actually blowing all the way back there. Now, another thing I wanted to show you is previously I made a video about putting some switches in the dash. Those switches right there, and I discovered it on my own, but then I was watching another video from a guy down south, or in the south of the United States somewhere. I think he might be in Carolinas maybe. He has a channel, and he was putting some switches down there, and he discovered it also. Somebody in the comments actually said something that these switches are where some, I don't know, air conditioning switches or something were for factory install. So anyways, that wasn't my idea. That's somebody else found that in another video. Anyway, regarding as far as the Howell goes, it works great. I love it. I'm thinking about putting a 4.0 head on here. I have one. It's a Remix 4.0 head, but it's got to be better than this one. I just don't know if it's worth the time. I also am thinking about building a stroker. I'm not really sure what I'm going to do. It'll probably wait till spring. But anyhow, if you have any questions about the install or anything, put them in the comments. Later. The computer, just want to show you where I mounted it. Here's the fuse block and the I guess ADAL or whatever it's called, the early version of the onboard diagnostics is right here next to the ashtray, easy access. I actually mounted the ECM, or the malfunction indicator light, in its factory location. You can kind of see it there. It says emissions maintenance. Maybe you can't. The computer, actual module, I mounted in the factory location. I actually used a portion of the factory bracket. You can see it's there. It's above the heater box. I just used that piece of aluminum and a couple of fasteners to go around it. I lined it with some rubber from a I can't remember if it was an inner tube or some other kind of sheet. And you can see across the factory bracket where it bolts to the firewall, and the GM computer just slid into there. I isolated it also with some rubber, and it's been working great. One thing that I did notice after doing the Howell fuel injection install is that it has a miss at idle. It's just a little stutter, and I don't know how much it affects the drivability. It doesn't seem to. It runs great. But I called Howell to ask him about the 4-liter swap. And the guy there, I think his name is Kyle, but I'm not sure. He is a super sharp guy in the engineering department, or maybe design. I don't know, but pretty smart guy, easy to talk to, easy to deal with. And I said, hey, I want to do the 4-liter head swap, possibly a stroker. He said, I have a PID or a file for that, no problem. And then I said, hey, while I got you on the phone, I got this intermittent miss at idle. He goes, oh, does it have the factory distributor? I said, yeah. He goes, well, that's your problem. He said, they're just not very good. So it should be changed to either a Ford or a Chevy 250 6-cylinder HEI. And I said, okay. So I went to my buddy's wrecking yard. Tried to find a 250 HEI. I found some, but while I was looking, he's like, I don't think those distributors are that expensive. So I started looking, and I actually found this company makes one for the 250 6-cylinder. The company's called A-Team, and that's the part number. And it had good reviews, and to me it seems to be a quality distributor, and it has the correct gear. If you do the 250 6-cylinder Chevy swap, you actually have to cut the gear down. You have to take the gear off, put the factory gear from your 258 on there, shave it down a little bit, and unless you buy a new gear for an AMC V8, apparently that's a direct swap. But this one's tight. The bearings, bushings feel good. There's no movement. It was about $100. Came with the pigtail for my tack signal and power, and it also came with it looks like those are it came with wires, and it also came with a set of looms, and actual inside there are labels for each of your wires. There's only 6, and on one side it should be pretty easy, but that's pretty cool. And apparently it's important that you put 8mm wires on there, because if you don't, the HEI puts out enough juice, it'll have some difficulties. But I don't know if this is smog legal. I would assume that it's not a problem, but I also don't know if a smog guy will notice that the distributor, it's a factory type distributor. I don't know if they would they'll even have any real heartburn with it. And if they do, then I will switch it back. No big deal. It passed last time I took this Jeep to smog it was just a couple of months ago with the Howell kit on, and no problems. It ran great. He said the guy that did the smog, I asked him about the miss, and he said I wouldn't worry about it. He said the thing runs great, and the numbers that he saw, he said it runs fine. I wouldn't worry about that. Miss. So, Mobile Electron. I don't know what that company there is, but we'll see how it works. Probably going to put that in another video.